So good morning, everyone. Another Connect and Share Friday morning, the 39th edition, and today is the 26th of February. We will be covering quite a bit today, but firstly, let me acknowledge our traditional owners and of the lands of which we meet today that care for our land, waters and sea, and pay my respects to all Aboriginal people, past, present and emerging. Hope that we work with them in a true spirit to care for the country in which we work on. So the quick review of need to knows, you would have received your membership newsletter this week, which was comprehensive in a bit of a summary of what you needed to look at. I'll go through those in a quick update or a quick summary if you like. But the first thing that you might have noticed is that the OCA are planning a summit. Now this is obviously to look at some of the challenges of our sector, and you might already be quite well aware of some conversations that have been taking place not only in these forums, in our happy hours, but also on social media, just around how we improve our industry going forward. How do we make it a more sustainable industry, not only for the people that work within it, but also the businesses that work within it, and encourage more people to participate. So there's a few challenges there, and of course, it could be anything from training pathways and career pathways, accreditation and safety, risk management, but also, marketing the sector and pay conditions and the likes of our industry players. So OCA, which you may know, is a body that has all of the peaks and some of the bigger outdoor players in the country, all working together to look at the leadership of the sector. And in hearing a lot of the comments and a lot of the work being done at the peak level in the States, we're now looking at how we deal with that on a federal level. So look, more information will come out soon, but you would have seen a newsletter that a summit is being planned, and it's being planned in New South Wales, but we will be hosting it for the country, but it will be via Zoom and in person. So we hope that as many people as possible can come in person if they wish to, but it's also via Zoom, and we'll be looking at strategically who's involved in that process, but we'll have more information as it comes to hand. So the opportunities that are currently open, and again, there seems to be quite a lot. So if you are looking at improving your business, if you're looking at upgrading your business, or just improving your own skills and experience, there's quite a bit that's open. So in Canberra, we have the ACT grant that we've been successful through Canberra Tourism, the PR campaign. We've got our current members in Canberra on board, and we're inviting anyone else that has an outdoor pursuit to also look at that as an opportunity. We have 2 positions left on our masterclass list. So if you really want to get on, it's the 29th of March. It's a full day session, and it goes through 4 different topics in quite depth, 2 positions available. So if you want those positions, please let me know. Email me today or over the weekend, and I'll set those aside for you. So great news that 2 more people can join us. The tourism grant. So again, like I said, if you're looking to upgrade your property or upgrade your business or increase your experience for your visitors, if you're in the tourism component of the industry, this is a great opportunity. You can apply for up to $150,000 with this grant. So please make sure you have a look at that. They actually close at the end of March. So you've got a month to basically pull that submission together. And obviously, as your repeat body, we are more than happy to also look at letters of support to support you in the application of that. So let us know if we can help you with that. The Entrepreneur Innovation Grant. So you would have remembered John Skiller came and joined us a few weeks ago to tell us about those. Again, quite a sum of money is up for grabs, and that's around innovation. So if you've got an innovative idea that you have implemented into your business or want to implement in your business, that is a great opportunity. It's a program, but it's also a grant program. Dine and Discover, which is a New South Wales program. Everyone will be getting vouchers very soon, $25 for dining, $25 for experience. and they can spend those in any businesses that register with the Dine and Discover program. So I urge all of our members to please jump on and register their business if they can accept walk-in business and tourists, to register, because then these people can spend their $25 with you and you get paid by the government. Choose Canberra voucher program is a little bit similar, and there's been a bit of a rejig to this program to enable more businesses to take part. So there's another one if you're in the ACT to make sure that you jump on board, and that's a great program for, similar to Dine Discover, it's not only marketing but also conversion, so looking at business through the door. National Outdoor Education Conference, you can see behind me, you can see it on screen now. The registrations are now open for this event. So the new dates, the 28th of September to the 1st of October. The conference actually starts at 3:30 on the 28th of September, and it goes through till Thursday evening, Thursday afternoon, and then you have the optional Friday of really experiencing the Blue Mountains outdoors. So I urge you to have a look at that if you want to reconnect with the industry, get some awesome ideas, network with all your colleagues in the industry. This is an opportunity to do so, and I think we're all dying to get back to that sort of activity after the last 18 months or so. So registrations are now open. You can jump onto our website, follow the links off our event listing page, and navigate through. Very soon, actually next Wednesday, all those that were approved for abstracts or workshops will be contacted by us, and we'll be asking you to just relook at your content and look at it in line of the new theme that we have set for the conference, obviously, again, coming out of this last 18 months, and make sure it still aligns to what I suppose the delegates will be requiring. So yeah, you'll hear from us next Wednesday. You can rejig it. If you feel it's not relevant anymore, you can also withdraw if you feel, and just attend as an attendee. Sponsorships are still available. There's a few more spots for that. So if you have a business that wants to access people that attend this conference, great opportunity to jump in now. And remember, we are a pre-approved event for the business grants through Oz Industry. So if you're wanting to come at that high level, you can have half of those costs subsidised again by the government. So any other questions on that, feel free to raise your hand here or come and speak to me or Leslie on after the session. Outdoor work in New South Wales and ACT. My goodness, this site, we set up this Facebook page a few months ago in call for a lot of demand of our businesses and the resources that they require now that we're back into business. And look, if you've got jobs that are available, please let us know, because we can throw it up onto this site. It's getting enormous traction at the moment, and the more you tag us in it or send us the information, we can put it up. We will share it amongst the groups in which we interact with, which gets a great viewership. And you can see from that page the amount of comments and interaction that's having. So please take advantage of that if you're employing. If you're looking for work, this is your place to go. And as Leslie was saying a little while ago, there's some great jobs that are coming up in that site right now. So jump on and have a look. A quick reminder about our Connect and Share Forum subjects. So today we're going to hear from Amanda on the New South Wales Nature Play Strategy, which is very exciting. Next week, we're going to talk about severe weather. And I think that's a topic that everyone needs to get their head around. Has become a little bit more unstable in our weather patterns, and plan for that, obviously, with the activities that we do outdoors. The 12th of March, I am going to be presenting to you the approved strategic plan from Outdoors New South Wales and ACT, because the board are looking at that next week. Hopefully we'll be signing off on it and I'll be able to present it to you on the 12th. And we'll talk about NOAC and some of the content that we'll be having at NOAC as well. 19th of March, I'm going to put it out there for any operator that has a problem, a challenge, an idea, or an innovation. I'd love you to come present it to us and get some feedback from the sector yourself. So if there's anyone out there that I know some of you have come to me with a few challenges of late, and this is a great opportunity to throw it out to the sector as well. So if you want to take that up, either call Leslie or myself and we'll lock you in on that date. And as usual, all recordings of past sessions are on YouTube for your latter viewing. So what we might do now is jump over to Amanda, and I will just find her presentation because I'm going to be controlling, and that's really scary. Here we go.
Not my presentation, Laurie. It's so
okay. Sorry, Sam's presentation with you.
I'm just the voice of Sam. Like, it's quite a strange time to have jumped in on this.
Okay. I'll let you explain, so I'll let you go for it.
For those that are there that know Sam Crosby, who's got a huge legacy at Centennial Park, she left on Friday after, I think it is 9 years. She grew nature play from the ground up out there, but has moved on to an arts-based role at Wollongong Council, which is the other side of her personality, her split life, really. So we wish her all the best. She's at the moment down near you somewhere, Dave, in the Snowy Mountains, doing something. Who knows, with Sam, probably with a night vision goggles out, doing something, but hopefully having a well-deserved break after pushing this through with minimal time and funding. But I came in at the 11th hour with 3 days notice to sort of pull this together for Centennial Park and for Sam, for the work she's put into it already. So I know she presented late last year, and I know that you know the work that I've done in the area, so it sort of makes a bit of sense that I've come in now. But if it's a bit grey in spaces, that's why. And it is such a short time frame to be working on something like this. But we'll go through. If you want to flick through, Laurie. Yeah, so the aims of the process were just to basically demonstrate what's going on in nature play in New South Wales at the moment, to look at the barriers and the barriers of the last 18 months, but the barriers more broadly, and to develop a list of recommendations. And I guess that's possibly the most important section going on in, but also to establish what Sam's termed a community of the willing. And that could be, you know, another word for a peak body or an association or a group. It's just basically trying to work out who's interested here. And I think in terms of outdoor rec, outdoor ed, and everyone involved in Outdoors New South Wales, I really challenge you to think of nature play not just for the early years sector, which is a really common misconception about what nature play is. So going forward, keep that at the top of your brain. Your opinions here matter more than most, to be honest, especially down in the Scouts down there too. See what your impact is in this space as well. Off you go, Laurie. I need a buzzer. Basically, it was 304 people were involved in the input. I was the one that read through all the data, and you can tell it's a really broad group. It's probably really good that I was the one to do that, not Sam, being quite independent from the whole process. You can tell that not everyone is an early years practitioner. There was a lot of people from council, a lot of people who are involved in public work. So keep that in mind. There was also a large component that we're talking about nature play being from 12 to 17. And I'm guessing that was some of you. I'm guessing. I didn't stalk you back and work out who those people were. You just go on. We're going to skip through, Laurie, to where there's a graph. Yeah. So basically, Sam's pulled these out of the data to say that it's a really broad spectrum of people that are involved in nature play, and that is so important because it's not just the 3-year-olds out there playing. What I think is really interesting with nature play at the moment is local councils are getting very involved in the space. I was down in Berry yesterday trying to drive a child to sleep that refused to sleep, and went past this huge new playground that I knew had been in the works for about 5 years, but stuff is starting to happen now. So we've got to jump on it from a broader perspective as well. If we just move on. We know the challenges in outdoor rec, more broadly, regulation and policy, training and skills, safety and risk, and lack of access. Like, they sound pretty familiar, don't they? The next one, I think, is our biggest problem in nature play, and it's bigger than the outdoor rec sector can you really imagine. when I went through the data for the first thing, I was saying to Laurie on the other forum that we did, I actually just screenshotted this particular graph and sent it to Sam and said, is this all we need? Because the capacity to develop nature play across New South Wales severely needs to be improved. We are years, if not a decade, behind other states in terms of our organisation of what is going on. It's not that it's not happening, it's happening, it's ad hoc, it's random, it's without support, it's sometimes totally misunderstood. And that's where New South Wales is in severe need of some help, especially after COVID, when there's more families outside than ever and more little kids outside than ever in maybe not so constructive ways, and nature play can assist that to be built to assist the outdoor rec sector, you know, when they're 13. We jump back to the beginning now. That was Sam's little issue with life, putting graphs in the middle. Stop. No, one more. No, that's it. So with the initial themes, we went through all of that data, and I sat with Sam one day and looked at what the themes were we thought from the online forums, and there were 3 of those. And at a rough estimation, we had done advocacy, training and skills, funding and resources, and creating some sort of network. We thought they might be the 4 themes that came throughout. So we generated codes, and I went through all of the data and just listed them next to the comments especially, but also the closed questions, just to see if they were the things that people were saying in a more secure environment in their surveys. If we click on, I put the initial themes into like a spreadsheet basically and look for bigger picture ideas. And the 4 initial themes weren't the 4 that came through. We'd missed a huge gap, and that was because most of the people filling in those surveys were either educators or connected to education. But what kept coming through was the access to natural space and how we can educate families and communities about using playgrounds and natural bushland. So we added in that category. If we jump on to the next one. Yeah, thanks, Sam. So the 4 eventual draft strategic recommendations were advocacy, which was first and foremost throughout. It could have gone next to any comment throughout the whole process. Funding and resources, assistance for educational settings, and support for families and communities. Keeping in mind that families and communities are probably most children's first access to the outdoors. So we'd sort of missed that in our planning. And if we look at what the other states have done with their nature play organisations in various formats, that's actually a focus of theirs. New South Wales had missed that, and maybe that's where we've been missing all along. I don't know. We move on. I won't read through all of these because they're going to be pretty familiar in terms of strategic priorities for most of you. But basically what we hope to do with advocacy is similar to what Outdoors New South Wales does in a little kid nature play, potentially not so little kid kind of way. Engaging with various levels of government and non-government agencies. We need accessible natural playgrounds for all, and that was a key theme as well, just not your standard drag and drop playground everywhere. Promoting the philosophy and overall benefits of nature play, especially to local councils, so they understand the need for spaces, and local councils could actually be written as land managers there, so you could think more broadly to national parks. Promoting the pedagogy and learning benefits of the outdoor environments with education settings. Now, I would propose in this setting that should be, 0 to 18 or 0 to, post-school options perhaps. New South Wales Education Department, hey Fran, is a different kettle of fish than some of the others. Promoting health and wellbeing and liaising with the Indigenous communities that we work and play amongst and respecting them. Moving on. Thanks. Funding and resources, no surprises there, but finding someone or a central point of contact so we actually know where we can get cash from, or funding or resources from, investing in spaces. And that's a huge one. And I was just alluding to it with the playground up in Berry. Funding of provision of resources as well, and a guide for family nature play. So these are all things that, you know, fit amongst the outdoor rec industry, you know, in a more broader sense. If we just move on, these can come to you in a Word doc. You don't need to have them read out to you completely. In terms of educational settings, and I know, David, you work amongst different states, don't you? And you would be well aware of the different priorities in different educational, you know, institutions within Australia, and New South Wales definitely is a different kettle of fish to Victoria. At the moment, we've tried, and I know various people online will have tried to go to the education department, and we've had, you know, mixed success. But we need from what everyone was saying in those comments, is we need a more constructive and I don't know, uniform support, basically, to work out where nature play or outdoor learning fits within not only early childhood but the primary as well. Exploring the provision of professional development and training. And that doesn't just need to be to teachers in schools. I know that in many of my previous lives, I was asked to educate outdoor educators on how to work with nature play. So we need to think really broadly on some of this stuff. Supporting the expansion of outdoor programs, because it is happening. We just need support. Engages with centres and schools to support policy for nature play, and exploring options for inclusion. And that inclusion theme was very strong throughout, and inclusion in terms of ability levels, but also Indigenous connections, and promoting nature play events, because that's traditionally been how some schools have actually worked out what nature play or outdoor learning is. And they're a means to an end, to be quite honest. I wouldn't have believed it before I worked on the outdoor classroom campaign a few years back. And the last one is families and communities. And I know a lot of the Outdoors New South Wales members possibly fit into this category as well, where they're delivering outdoor activities to families and within the broader community rather than within a school. The biggest theme that came out here was liaising with local council to work out what play spaces were. And it sounds so basic, but it's clearly not. Exploring how families and communities use natural play spaces, and basically supporting them. The rest of the points are basically supporting families. So that's it. Fran, I know you've jumped online with more knowledge than me in so many of these spaces. Is there anything you want to add? Don't look at me like that. Is there anything you want to add, especially in terms of the early childhood sector, that maybe this cohort of people hasn't heard before about where nature play sits within the early years framework?
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry I was late. I had a bit of a moment trying to get into Zoom, but now I'm here. The early years sector in New South Wales has been a little bit slower than the early years sector in Victoria to take off in outdoor nature play, but we have an organisation termed New South Wales Early Years Nature Connections Group, and we've been going since 2013. We're now an incorporated association, but in the early childhood sector, we think there's probably about 300, at least 300 early years settings who are taking children out on a regular basis during the week, and it might be one time, two times, might be a number of times per term if it's a preschool, or ongoing all throughout the year if it's a long day care centre. So we have a philosophy, we have a vision, we have a why, and we've actually put together, we had a meeting on Saturday, and we've put together a reply to these points, which I'll send to you probably in the next couple of days. Yeah. So the early years sector is very well aware of it. We all early years educators and teachers have education and training around children's learning, so there is no need for that around that. I think possibly professional learning, professional development could come around the why we would want to do it, because we've found in the early childhood area that some for-profit early years settings are using it as a marketing tool rather than having an underpinning philosophy that is embedded within their early childhood settings. So,
and quite
I guess,
tokenistic too, eh, Fran?
pardon?
Quite
Tokenistic,
tokenistic,
yeah. There is some research coming out from the early years sector around nature play, starting in Australia. I've just finished a PhD around nature play and sustainability. So in my investigations with that, I found that there is a bit sort of coming out, but sporadic. It's pretty sporadic.
And you're definitely the strongest sector within the whole. Like, I don't necessarily need to use the term nature play, but early years outdoor learning sort of focus, definitely the strongest sector within it. And I think driving it up through the schools, I'd suggest that some of the kids coming to those 300 or so centres in New South Wales are the ones going to their primary school saying, where's your outdoor program?
Yeah, well, it's mandated in our national quality standards that children have to be involved in outdoor play, but it's taking the children outside the centres, because in some centres, particularly in centres in large cities, have their outdoor play actually indoors. So it's not actually outdoors; it's indoors in air-conditioned spaces. And because early years settings, a lot of them now, I think it's about 75% are for profit, there's sometimes a different mentality around what is important. But some of the settings, and I did find in my research that they're taking the educators from the early years settings are taking it to the schools, because the children have been used to going out, and they're going to the schools and saying, well, what are we doing? Why aren't we going out? Yeah,
you're definitely, and I think everything I've ever seen or been involved in with the early years, it's pretty commendable, especially in New South Wales, where our challenges are different to some of the other states.
Yeah. Victoria is really supportive. They've Parks Victoria and the Department of Education and Training have also both of them have put out guidelines for what they call in Victoria bush kinder. So if we can get onto our state government to do something like that, or Parks and Wildlife, that would be a bonus.
But
no, I'm not.
1,000 times there, Fran.
Yeah.
But that's thanks, Fran. I just think the early years sector, we've got a lot to learn from, and your input is huge. And I think where the early years has got, I'm looking forward to the responses too, because they're incredibly valid. I think what the early years can do at one end, a lot of the other people that are on the Zoom chat can do at the other end. I was saying to Laurie the other day, after our Zoom call, I was teaching kindergarten when I first sort of went off into this outdoor learning sort of sphere. And I was looking at these kids that couldn't sit on the grass, and they would engage in nature, and they had no interest in being outside. And one of the reasons that I sort of proceeded to go along this way was, number one, they weren't learning to take risks, and they weren't learning to read. So I was taking them outside in a traditional outdoor ed framework. But also, if we can get our early years kids and our primary kids interested, involved, families outside, the rest of it, it benefits the whole outdoor ed sector as an entirety. And if we can send out that form, that feedback form, and anyone like the Scouts and Dave, or anyone else who I can't see on that list who's involved with the much bigger kids and even adults involved in nature play post-COVID, it'd be great to get your feedback on what you think needs to happen. The survey really was understandably early childhood heavy, and it's always going to be. But it doesn't mean that the input from the older groups is probably just as vital, to be honest. What do you need? Our 11-year-olds going into camps, what do you need them to be able to do? Like, think about it like that. Think broadly, because I know when kids were coming from early years, I knew what they needed when they were coming into kindy, but we don't know the whole spectrum, and that's somewhere where New South Wales is very ad hoc. We don't necessarily talk to each other, and we should, because if we talk together, we're better for it. and I don't mean physically talk, because I'm quite happily talk to any of you at a conference, but we don't have a governing,
Yeah.
you know that, don't you, Fran? Thanks for laughing. They have a governing body over the top, you know, and it doesn't, we're not saying here in these recommendations we need a nature play association. We're not saying we need the Victorian model, which has an established network in a strong outdoor ed community. We're not saying any of those things. We don't have an answer to that question, and don't think that we do, because we absolutely don't. There's been some beginning discussions with Laurie about, you know, how that could look in New South Wales, and that's where that is. I'm just reading Katrina Venables. Now, Katrina works at Sport and Rec. Sorry, Katrina, for disclosing who you are. Not really. The early years are doing it well, but it stops the primary and high school years where Katrina's are. In my experience, primary teachers don't have the skills or knowledge to facilitate nature play all the time. And that, as a teacher, I would 100% agree. For someone that used to deliver professional development to primary school teachers, it used to go back as basic to, this is how you walk your children to the bush 100 metres from the gate. This is how you call them back in when they're outside. I've been asked multiple times to deliver that sort of PD online, and I'm like, yeah, I can't teach that online. That is something you've got to be outside to do. As a parent, I'm frowned upon by teachers and other parents. You're not frowned upon by everyone, Katrina, but your opinions are pretty common, I think, and I think more people need to speak up as well. Laurie, I don't think there's anything left that needs really to be shown in that presentation, only the next steps, which basically are what's happening. And I know that it's a tiny time frame. I wrote down a timeline of what's got to happen for this. And yeah, it's not ideal, but at least it's something. At least we're getting somewhere with it. Laurie, is Angela there from Nature Play Queensland?
Yeah, I was just about to ask Angela if she had some thoughts from a Queensland perspective, but yeah, Angela, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
That's all right. It sounds like you've been on a really wonderful journey of discovery as to, what's happening around the state, and we've certainly been following Sam and been helping her out with information and all sorts of things, filling out questionnaires and all sorts of things for Sam. And we wish her all the very best in her next adventure. I've told her that she's probably sure to find nature play where she's going anyway. So I don't think I'm sure it'll turn up somewhere in her practice. Look, I really much agree with everything you have been saying. We have the connections that we've had with early learning centres has been significant, and that's certainly where we started in Queensland with our work, was through early learning centres. But we have progressed over the last, so my background is open space planning and local government, nearly 40 years in local government in open space planning, parks and recreation. So my involvement with Nature Play Queensland started as a volunteer for 6 years doing nature play spaces. And all my work started in early years, in early years centres, but in the last 3 years moved significantly into the primary area, into primary schools. And so most of our work now is entirely in primary schools, doing some quite extraordinary things. So that there is a progression through, as you're saying, through to primary schools. It's very often families who have had wonderful early years experiences in centres that do a lot of nature play, a lot of outdoor stuff, then go into primary schools and discover that there's nothing, or that there's very limited stuff. So they start driving it from the grassroots in the school setting. And this started happening in Queensland about 5 years ago. And so we were getting a lot of parents who got kids who were in prep or in year one going, this is, and it's still happening. We're working with a school in Slay Point in Mackay at the moment, where they've parents rang and said, my kid's just come out of Amazing Centre and she's now in prep in a school and there's nothing, and how can we help her? And so that's fairly fairly typical. And certainly all our education stuff, it covers both early learning and primary. But we're just about to move into the 13 to 18-year-old age bracket with what we're calling a Pathways program. And the Pathways is taking our nature play audience, which is at the moment we have 30,000 families that engage with us fairly regularly through our social media and our e-newsletters. And so we're going to work with that group in particular, but it's not exclusive by any means. And we're going to work with Outdoors Queensland's members and choose what I would call family-friendly outdoor recreation activities and organisations, and start to do some transition and scaffolding of our families with 0 to 12s, because 12s turn to 13 and they turn to 14, and suddenly you've got a family of 10, 12 and 14. And we're going to do some physical literacy guidelines for nature play and outdoor recreation for that 0 to 18-year-old age group. We've discovered that the physical literacy guidelines at a national level are very sport orientated, and we'd like to just work hopefully with Education Queensland or Sport and Rec Services to develop a set of guidelines for play, physical literacy and play, and outdoor recreation. So that program's kicked off. We've already done a trial using motorsport, and kids who are have been nature play players and now are in as a family into motorsport. Still some very young. So we've done some case studies around that, and we now are going to go into a bigger trial across a range of the Outdoor Queensland members who are already focused around providing those pathways for young people into the outdoors, into a more, it's still playful. So for example, we've worked with Queensland Moto Park who have 5-year-olds or 4-year-olds on motorbikes. We've helped them build them a nature play space, and they're going to run some mud world activities. So we're combining that nature playfulness with the physical literacy that they take those kids on to become competent dirt bike riders, for example. And that's just one example. So, and we have many. So I completely agree that the notion of that 0 to 18 is that will be our main focus from now on. Yep.
Angela, thanks for some of those comments. I actually link in with a comment that Liz Horn, who'd be known to many of you, has written in the comments section. Liz has worked with Outdoors New South Wales, ACT over the years, and has a couple of boys that I'm sure are outside doing something as we speak. The comment at the beginning is fine. Other states have managed to do it. Yeah, they have. This bit I'm going to actually read to you because it's profoundly true. Is there a reluctance of the state government in New South Wales to come to the party to understand the benefits that nature play can add to the lifelong health and learning? How does this fit into sport and recreation regional planning? When I was playing Laurie last year or the year before, Department of Sport and Rec did exactly what Angela was just talking about in the physical literacy component, and they broke up what they perceived the age groups through life to be, and there was an age group that was, I think, 0 to 4 or 0 to 5. It didn't actually make a whole lot of sense, actually. And some of the people in Sport New South Wales questioned why the early years needed to be involved. It was a phone meeting, thankfully not a Zoom meeting, or my face would have said it all. I politely bit my tongue and answered, you should never ever say that around an early childhood teacher. why physical literacy is not important. They knew I was
most
online.
important.
Yeah, they knew I was online and they knew my background. So I was just like going, you crazy guys, like you actually crazy. Where does physical literacy fit? No, I don't have a poker face, thanks, Liz. Where does physical literacy fit in that age group? It's the most important. It's the absolute most important in providing for kids through adulthood, where they can get those gross motor skills and physical literacy skills. We were in conversations with Sport at the time, which had a very sport focus. Most of the staff that were pushing physical literacy for the 0 to 12-ish kind of age group before sports pathways have since left. And I think that speaks volumes about where sport in Australia went. But in terms of their policies, in terms of sport and rec's documentation, in terms of absolutely everything, physical literacy was coming out as number one. And the way to do that in kids is get them playing. So how does it fit into sport and recreational planning? It's everywhere, but they just don't realise it. And they can be told, and they can be involved in conversations about it. And I know when Sport and Rec put on the Department of Sport put on their deep dive, Sam was there. Some of Katrina's colleagues were there at the early learning table and at the table I was sat at, which was 5 to 12s. And we very strongly spoke about the importance of physical literacy. And I don't think that question will get asked again. They were some of the more vocal groups, understandably. But sport, they're not particularly listening yet. Maybe one day. Laura, you might have an update on that. I bet it hasn't come to the table with COVID. No, I think COVID probably stalled what was the beginning of a really good conversation.
Yeah. I think they're still getting back to their normal processes now. They've had a lot of challenges, as we all have. But
the other way it fits into their planning is in the development of infrastructure and places, and we are in a state that is different to Victoria or Queensland. A lot of the time in New South Wales, it is spoken through about what is being built, and it disgusts me that is there. But you've only got to look at our stadiums program to see that. And maybe it is in New South Wales about how we use the playgrounds that we have and that we need to have. And the conversation can start there as well. There's a few points, but Liz, that's a pretty profound question, and one that it is blatantly obvious.
We discovered in terms of spaces and places, we discovered that once schools realised that they had old play infrastructure that they didn't need to replace, and they could still have really valuable play spaces, natural play spaces. There's been this movement to when a piece of playground equipment reaches its shelf life, to not replace it, and to replace it with nature play, with loose parts play areas, with more vegetation. So there's a bit of a movement to recognise that nature play can basically happen anywhere in the outdoors. If they're unlocking previously, so supervision that might have happened around a play structure might now be moved towards the bushland area, so that they say, oh, those natural areas are out of bounds. They're now massively coming back into bounds, and they're moving their supervision into those spaces because they recognise the value of children playing in those bushland areas. So there's been a big movement towards that happening in Queensland as well, in terms of spaces. So it's actually saving them money and not having to replace, spend $100,000 replacing it with some sort of thing.
I'm going to have to go. I've got, I think I'll end up putting a helmet on a clip. I've just got a couple of thoughts before I head off. Yeah.
Go for it, Doug.
Okay. Amanda, have you talked with Doug Farr down at Westgarth in Victoria?
Yeah, and I can see Fran, who's on my screen, which is good, nodding. Yeah, absolutely. And Doug, yeah. There's many Dougs in Australia. Be my argument, and always have.
Yes, Doug professes to be the inaugurator of nature play in Australia, and we do recognise that he was one of the first people to start this, but he doesn't own. No. And I will say that categorically. There are many different ways of delivering what we loosely call nature play across Australia in the early years, and Doug is certainly one of those people. There's a group in Victoria, the ECOLN group. They're having a conference, a nature play for early years conference in March that I'm going down to speak at. And just before, I'll let David start and finish, and then I'll keep going. But yes.
Yeah, I didn't know what your response was going to be there, friend, because I've always argued there's many Dougs, and I rate the work Doug does highly, and I think he's definitely part of the conversation. But
Doug approached out to the previous Outdoors Victoria and the Victorian Outdoor Education Association years ago, and we all senior people, myself and others, went down, and that's where we started Outdoors Victoria and Outdoor Education supporting the whole concept. And so we've supported from there a whole range of initiatives, and as you say, there's lots of options. I also encouraged and am still involved myself for people to join Early Childhood Australia, which is another player in the whole early childhood field, because we need to try and educate that organisation to put more nature play into what they're pushing with government as well.
I'm David. I can just intervene there. I'm part of a group who are involved with Early Childhood Australia, and we're at the moment just writing. There are some provocation cards that are being written currently that will be coming out for early childhood educators around nature play and sustainability. So we're well into the ear, a number of us in New South Wales, into the ECA ear. Their ears are relatively closed, but they're not definitely closed.
David, I think what you highlighted something.
The two advantages are, we saw it as outdoor education, as if we could get the parents and the kids involved in early childhood, the parents then believed in outdoor education, outdoor recreation as they went through. And small operators like myself, we actually run abseiling and other adventures for 3 to 6 year olds. So the other thing was commercial operators actually running activities. For service activities for kids with families with small children, which is another step onto what you're doing here. So keep up the good work. I'm going to have to go and put a harness on. So
thanks, David.
Thanks, Dave.
All right,
Thanks for sharing, Victoria. I think what Doug has done really well, and you can argue, friend, any way you wish, or anyone else. I think what Doug and some of the Victorians have done is actually promote themselves exceptionally well. And spread their news really well, and that's so pivotal in what New South Wales needs to do. And I think if we can learn many things from Doug and people like Doug, but that to me is the first one.
I agree. We've been slow. We have been slower here, but I guess everybody works full time, and it's just now that I've stopped working full time, and our group has started to grow a bit more and be more active.
We're a different
good luck with everything, guys. I'm off.
Thanks, David.
Thank you,
Victoria. Thanks. I don't have anything else particularly to say, Laurie. I do, but not right now.
Just on the next steps, Amanda. So time frame wise, obviously the deadline for the survey is the 3rd.
I've just written down the time frame now. So if we get that, we've basically got a week to get any feedback in, and it can be as long or as short or a focus point as you wish. But definitely the people online today, we'd love to get your greater perspective on where nature play has impacts for the broader sector. Where does it fit? How do the priorities match with some of the things that the bigger outdoor peaks would come across? I know David has spoken to me a couple of times about, Outdoors Victoria and what they've done down there.
Yeah.
And about how Andrew will go into the education department and talk about outdoor learning and nature play. Like, you know, how does New South Wales do that in the broader perspective? So don't just think kids outside playing with sticks. I want you to think, you know, putting the harness on the kid at the next level. Think broadly. If you want to give feedback, generally go for it. But I'd love to hear within the greater spectrum from people online today. Yeah, definitely considering that's their skill set. It's a really short time frame to work with. It is far from ideal, but it's what we have. And
when you collate all that, what happens next?
The aim is for that report to be out by Nature Play Week, which is at the end of April. Yeah, just pretty soon. And then that will go off to various stakeholders. The funding for it came in a very convoluted way, but Centennial Parklands, which is obviously a government agency, and I've spoken to Sam before she graciously left us about the audience for that report being greater than Centennial Parks Foundation that has funded some of this, because otherwise what's the point of it?
Absolutely.
So give some broader feedback, and hopefully there'll be enough as a supporting document to go with other things that have been done in New South Wales and will continue to be done in Wales. Yeah, that's and then we just go from there, I guess. Yeah, like I said, it's not an ideal time frame. It's not, it's just part of a process, I guess.
That's right. And just so everyone's clear, and I think everyone knows I'm very outcome focused, when we look at this strategy and whatever vehicle or resources or you know, as you said, there's no prescribed way of how this is going to be implemented right now. And that's certainly, as you said, the feedback you also want. But when it does go to the broader industry, who takes carriage of those results is still yet to be determined.
Yeah, there's no, the way this was funded, and again, not ideal, there was no what's ongoing funding for it, but we can definitely make headway. And looking at some of those survey results and how they fall, there is definitely headway. And I can say that because I wasn't involved in the collation of that data.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Or like it's even now we've got people from different spheres on one phone call, which hasn't necessarily happened before. So yeah, and if that's what this process has done, then great. That tick one and keep going. In terms of outcomes more broadly, we get this down, we get it written, we get it to the people that have funded it, and then hopefully it's done in such a robust way that it's, you know, when someone does ask that question like, Liz, you know, what's Sport and Rec doing? It can go to them. All right, I'm going to have to go in as well, but thanks, Laurie.
No, thanks, Amanda, for the overview and the summary, and absolutely awesome way of sharing what's going on. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for sharing, friend. Very much appreciated.
No, that's fine. Just before you do go, we're having our first gathering for the year at Kirraville Community Preschool on Saturday.
Which is a great place to go and see if anyone's close.
If anyone's close, come. It's our first one for the year, and we'll be planning, and we're also planning a conference for Saturday the 14th of August for the early years nature outdoors.
Oh, that's great, Fran.
And we've also got a textbook coming out in September around nature play for the early years. Great.
Do you want to send me some stuff and I'll put it into the newsletter for next week?
Sure. I haven't got a flyer for the book yet. We're discussing the cover photo as we speak.
And you've got a question from Katrina. She said, what time tomorrow?
Didn't your kids go there? Yeah.
On Saturday, 10 o'clock. Yeah. If you go to the Facebook for New South Wales Early Years Nature Connections, it's on there.
Okay. Early Years
Yep.
Connections. Right. And I'll just
terrific. Thank you.
That's all right. Have you got my email address there, Fran, or do you want me to put in the chat?
I've got the info one now.
Okay, yeah, send it to Leslie and
Yeah.
she can put it on to me. That's
Okay,
fine.
thanks, Laurie.
No worries. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Well, look, 3 minutes to go. Thanks so much, Angela, for jumping on and sharing Queensland's perspective. It's so good to have all the states in these conversations and try to navigate some of the challenges that either you've conquered or we've found and yeah, try to sort a solution together. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're certainly here to support you as much as we can.
Thank you. We are one
people.
industry after all.
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
I said to someone the other day, I find the duplication at the peaks is amazing. So we've got to try to work together a lot more and get less duplication, more results. So no, awesome stuff. Thank you all. I'll give you 2 minute early mark this week, and thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next week. But if you're around at 4 o'clock and you want to have a bit of a chat, come on to the happy hour, which the link's on our Facebook page. So other than that, have a great weekend. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday.